Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Jones. I'm with Jones Business Management and Growth Consultants, and this is our webinar this week is why you're still not profitable. We are going to talk about the basics for solo operators and for small landscaping businesses on pricing as we go along. If you have any questions, please be sure, if you're on YouTube, to put them in the comment section, and I will keep an eye out for them at the different points when I stop to check for questions. We will try and answer them, and we will have a short question and answer session at the beginning. At the beginning, I'm okay. At the end. Um, again, welcome. The uh, to all our viewers, both on Zoom through our Landscaping Business Growth Hub, which is a free Facebook group for landscapers, and then the larger community on YouTube that views live and also when it's posted later. So, without further ado, why don't we just go ahead and get started here? I'm going to share my screen and we will start the presentation. Okay. Why you're still not profitable. Pricing basics for solo and small businesses, small landscaping businesses. So, of course, like I said, I do want to welcome everybody here. Um, who's this for? It's for solo operators and companies with one to two, or possibly just getting ready to start a second crew. But the stuff that I'm going to discuss here is for your basic landscaping business, just in the early stages, because the pricing and setting up your business gets more complex as you grow, and we will talk about that a little further into this presentation. What I am going to teach you is how to price for profit and not for survival. And what do I mean by that? Um, Profit, it is the money that you get to keep. Okay. Revenue is the money that the business earns. And I'm sure that a lot of you understand that, but some people, seem to get gummed up a little bit on that. So I am going to cover some of, the basic terms in here for anybody who doesn't understand them. So you want to price for profit. So you want to price for how much money you get to keep, okay, at the end of the month versus just how much money you take in. Because if you're just worried about how much money you take in, you're going to be fighting for survival every single day. I can guarantee it. Okay. By the end, you'll know where your money is really going because you'll understand what it costs to price a job effectively. Okay. So the big pricing lies that keep you broke. Okay. Myth number one, I hear this frequently from a lot of newer people that, they'll think, well, what they'll ask. I see it on free Facebook groups, and I even see it with people that come to me and ask me to kind of look at their systems. They're like, well, what would you charge for this? Well, I can't tell you what I charge. What I charge is not going to be what you are going to charge, right? So, because you have different overhead, you have different goals and dreams and aspirations, and your season is different from region to region. And what do I mean by that? Well, I was based in Florida for over 20 years with my landscaping business. I was working 52 weeks of the year. 52 weeks of the year, my business was in operation. But a buddy of mine that has a company up in upstate New York, his landscaping season runs about 32 weeks. He does do snow, but you can't really count on that, right? You can count on grass growing and landscape work needing to be done. Even in a drought, there's still things that need to be done. You can't count on snow. So me telling you what I would charge for a price is going to be entirely different than what he would charge for a price. Okay. Being the cheapest wins more work. That's myth number two. No, being the cheapest is really a good way to be a broke business. And again, I say this frequently. I do want to say it again. When you compete on price with somebody else, it's a race to the bottom. Why? Because you don't even know if that other company's making profit. And if you don't know that they're making profit, why would you set your prices at what theirs are? Okay. Myth three, if I stay busy, I'll eventually get ahead. No, that's actually not true. You could be chasing the dollar just to break even and still not even break even. If you don't have margins worked into your price, margins are the percentage of your overall expenses that you want to turn into profit. Okay. And we'll discuss how to get there in just a moment. The pricing for your business, this is the truth, needs to be based on business principles, business math. You can't base it off of what somebody else is charging. You can't base it off a gut feeling. And about 2 months ago, I did a webinar on how to price a lawn job, just looking at the math of it, because the worst thing I see people do there is, oh, this looks like it'd be a 30-minute job. Yeah, you don't know because you're not doing any of the math behind it. You're just guesstimating. A guesstimate's fine, if you want to give somebody a ballpark, but if you want to make money in your business, and I would hope that you do, right? You're not a charity. If you want to make money in your business, you have to follow the rules of business. And that is you price according to the time and materials and the profit margin that you want to have and coupled with your overhead. Okay. So business math, business math. The four core pillars of pricing are labor burden, okay, overhead, materials, and variable costs, and profit. And we're going to talk a little bit about labor burden. I'm going to get into some examples here that I really, really, really want people to start grasping, because I talk about the a number of things that come up as labor, but I want to get a little bit more in detail this time, with some of it. And then we're going to talk about overhead and some myths with that, materials and variable costs, and profit. Okay. So, what is your labor burden? Okay. And I'm going to explain it simply. It's the true cost to employ yourself or an employee. Let's say you hire an employee and you say that you're going to pay him $25 an hour. That is not the true cost for that employee. Okay. Because you've got to pay the payroll taxes like Social Security and Medicare. Let's pause for a second and talk about that. If all you've ever done up till now, if you've never employed somebody, but you've worked as an employee, you get your paycheck, you think you're earning $500, you open it up, they've taken out taxes, but then they also take out this thing called FICA, right? And Medicare, Social Security, Medicare. Okay. And that comes to, I think it was 7.65% of your check goes to that. What you probably didn't realize is that the employer pays this another 7.65% that you don't see. Okay. So whatever they take out of your check for FICA, they're paying that same amount that's been hidden from you. But it's not hidden from the business owner. That's a true cost. Okay. They're not paying it out of their pocket. You have to earn, you as an employee have to earn that money in the work that you do so that they can pay it. Just because it's hidden doesn't mean that, that it's not being paid, that it's not an expense. Okay. Unemployment is another thing that most employees never see. And there's federal unemployment and a state unemployment. And if you don't account for those things, okay, it screws up your labor price. Workman's comp insurance. There's two ways. We talked about this last week in the webinar. We went into it a little bit, but there's two ways that your insurance come in. The small amount goes towards your um, into your overhead, right? That's just the money that you're paying to the insurance company just to have the policy. But then work comp charges you a rate per $100 that you pay the employee to insure them in case they have an accident, right? So they could say, okay, a basic landscaper, it's going to be $3.50 per $100. That's 3.5%. That needs to be added on. Let me give you, simple math to be able to understand it. If this were 30 years ago and you were paying somebody $10 an hour, okay, you are going to pay um 35 cents on top of that $10. Hang on. Yeah, 35 cents. That's 5% of $10. So for every $10, you're paying, 35. For every 100, you're paying $3.50. Whatever the rate is, that's got to be added into the labor for the person. But here's where people kind of, start as you start to progress and understand your expenses. The next question that always comes up is, well, how do I account for the hours where somebody's not earning money? And let me give you an example of that. Let's say you start work at 8, you in the afternoon, but out of those 8 hours of work, you're actually only at jobs for 6 of them. Your employees should be earning money to pay for their entire day. So that means that they've got 2 hours, 8 hour workday, minus 6 hours that they're in production. They have 2 hours where they're not in production. And that needs to be accounted for across the 6 hours that they are in production. Okay. And that's, non-billable time. So we've got non-billable time and paid time off, holidays and sick days also. Say you give your employees 2 weeks off. You're not paying that out of your pocket. That's got to be accounted for someplace. If it's not accounted for, you are paying for it out of your pocket. But you're going to go out of business pretty soon because you can't afford to, have expenses that you are not accounting for. Okay. So here's an example calculation. We've got wages of $20 an hour, okay, for an employee. Your payroll taxes and insurance come to about 12%. That adds $2.40 to the 20. Paid time off impact, okay, so the vacation that they have, calculated in this at 5%. So that means an extra $1 an hour. And then your workers' comp and other costs come to 3%, so 60 cents an hour. So your true labor cost for a $20 employee is actually 24. Okay. So your pricing needs to cover that $24 an hour when you're looking at the labor, not just the 20, or you're bleeding the money. If you only charge enough to cover the wage, you are eventually going to go broke. I want to stress that. Okay. Even if you are a solo operator, if you are not accounting for your downtime in your overhead or in your labor, if you're paying yourself by the hour, you are not going to make as much money as you should. Okay. And you deserve to make as much money. If you're a quality worker, if you're watching this, you're concerned about how to have a good company, which means that you care about your company, which tells me that you are likely doing quality work. So if you're doing quality work, you should get quality pay, period. Right? Overhead is the most misunderstood concept. It's a fixed monthly cost. Now, I have had countless conversations with people just starting out who want to tell me that the only overhead that they have is my truck's paid for, so all I have is the insurance on my truck and the gas. No. You have far more overhead than that. If you don't, then you're not really running your business legitimately. Okay. But I can guarantee you that you've got far more overhead than that. Your truck insurance, your business insurance, the fees in order to, if you're incorporated, right, every year that fee's got to be repaid. Subscription services for whatever it is that you are, how you're accounting or how you're sending your emails, anything that you have to pay for to run the business, your website, any marketing that you do, all these things are overhead. And if it when people tell me this is all they have, I start to give them like well, what about this? What about that? And then finally they realize that they need to go and like pull all the receipts they have and start breaking them into what's overhead and what's variable costs, right? Or and get that stuff down into figures because you need to know what your true overhead is. Once you know that, then you can really, you got your overhead, you got your labor burden. We are on track. okay, to start growing, growing out the pricing for your business. Your overhead stays the same regardless of the hours worked. Now, overhead can go up, it can go down, but generally it stays at a fixed number for a period of time, whether it be a couple of months or a year. Your overhead is a consistent things. Okay. So for example, rent, if rent a facility for your business or a storage facility just to keep everything at night so nobody jacks it off your yard, okay, that's overhead. And that amount of money that you're paying for it is the after month. Right now, it may come up for renewal and they increase it, but for the 12-month or 9-month duration of the lease, that price is the same. Your insurance, your liability insurance, it's going to be the same throughout the year, and all these things are fixed. And generally, once you figure them out, unless you get a new bill with a notice that something's going up, your overhead is fixed. Okay. Now, um, briefly, and we'll go into this a little bit more. The more production hours that you do in a month, the lower your hourly cost to cover your overhead. Okay. So, how overhead gets allocated? Your monthly overhead gets divided by the total production hours that you do in a month. Okay. And it gives you your overhead cost per hour. So, as an example, let's say that you track your time and you know that over the course of a month, you're actually in production. And when I say in production, that means doing something that's physically earning money, whether it's mowing a lawn, planting a tree, going to pick up supplies when you charge the delivery fee, whatever. That's a production hour, okay? And because you're good, you're tracking your production hours, you're at 110 hours. So $5,500 is your overhead. Let's use that for the example throughout this lesson. At 110 hours, that means that your overhead charge is $50 an hour. But now you start looking at making your business more efficient. How do I get it out the door faster? How do I, get more jobs closer together so I'm doing less drive time? And you manage to increase your production hours for the month from 110 to 120. Well, that overhead, which as we said stays consistent, is now divided by 120 production hours, giving you $45.83 as your new overhead uh, rate per hour. Okay. I'm going to pause for a moment and see if there are any questions. So bear with me. We have anything? Got nothing on there. And let's see on here. No. Okay, we're going to go back to Sharon then. And oh, okay. So myth, overhead increases the more I work. That is not true. The more you work, your overhead doesn't increase. If you only worked 1 hour during the month, the rent for that storage facility is still going to be whatever rate it was when you worked last month for 120 hours. Okay. So overhead should not increase the more you work. If it is, then chances are you've put something variable into your overhead cost. Okay. What you want to do is spread your overhead across as many channels as you can. So, one, increase your production hours, but two, increase the number of jobs that you have that require extra employees because then your overhead can go down. Okay. Material and variable costs. So, materials, job specific things like mulch, plants, fuel, or spray that's specific to a job. Okay. Variable costs are costs that fluctuate. And I will give you an example here. Um, let's say that you get really good, you start tracking um, how many yards you can mow before you have to change your lawnmower blades. Okay. And let's say you come up with the answer 100. And let's say that a pack of mower blades cost you, $60. Okay. You can now say that each yard that you mow, it costs 60 to replace those blades. Okay, you're using 60 cents worth of lawnmower blades before you have to replace them. But that's a variable cost, right? So it's not, hey, every month I need to buy it, because if you do 100 yards in a month, yes, every month you need to buy it. But if you boost your sales to 200 yards a month, now you need to buy them twice a month. Does that make sense? Okay. So these, though, your materials and variable costs get added on top of labor. And profit. Profit is a line item. It's not what's left over. This is a big mistake a lot of people make. They price out their job without having a profit margin on it. They just tack a little bit of extra on there and then hope, that they're going to have money. Okay. Instead, what you need to do is tack a percentage on there, not a dollar figure, a percentage that will create the dollar figure for you, whether it's 30%, 40%, 50, whatever profit margin. And understand, getting more technical and more detailed, certain jobs that you perform in this industry, you can charge a far higher margin on than others. Okay. Your lawn mowing is not going to be as high a margin as your stone work or your hardscaping work. Hardscaping work, you can get up there in the 60s, sometimes even 70 if you're really, really good in the profit margin, but you put that percentage on there to get that dollar figure. Okay. And then it's added after you have added everything else together. So you got to do your labor and your overhead and your materials and then come up with the profit as a percentage of all of those. So here's a simple pricing example. Solo operator, his monthly overhead's 5,500, does 110 hours in production, giving him $50. His labor burden's 25. He doesn't have any variable expenses in this. He comes up with $75 total and then adds his profit margin of 20% on there to come up with $90 an hour. Okay. That's his rate for him. Okay. It's very simple, but it requires some back end work. And that back end work that you need to do is get all these figures together, especially the overhead. Please don't have a conversation with me and tell me that your overhead is $200 a month. Now, here's a growth example. If that solo operator were to add a second worker, it increases his labor burden, okay? But his overhead, it might increase, right? A little bit, maybe, for, like extra equipment that he needs to buy and upkeep and stuff. But the hourly rate for the overhead will actually lower, okay? And how do I mean that? So let's, if overhead stayed the same, let's just say it stayed the same. Yeah, and you were all by yourself, 5,500 divided by that 110, you come up with $50 an hour. But if we added a second employee, we're now, instead of working 110 production hours, we're working 220. Two people are out in the field earning money. Okay. You can work twice as fast, so you're earning twice as much money. You've increased the hours. Now the overhead drops to $25 an hour. Each employee becomes responsible for $25. Each employee, two employees, divided into the $50 an hour is how we get the 25. So if we had three employees and the overhead stayed the same, each employee would be responsible for $16.67. Okay. Hope that makes sense. If you were to do that, right, and get your overhead down, and now your rate, per hour, per person would go down from the $90. Would you lower your price? Should you lower your price? You could, yes. But why? Okay. You're already capable of earning the $90 an hour rate that you came up with. Now you put two people out there, you want to keep it at that 90 because as you grow, right, you need that extra profit for the short term so that you can continue to grow. But as you grow, your overhead will start to go back up. And when your overhead starts to go back up, you don't want to be, today my price is 90. Hey, I hired a new guy. Guess what, guys? You're also lucky. I'm lowering my price to $60. And then 6 months later, oh, I got to go back up to 90. People are going to go, I don't want to deal with you. You figure out your price. You can go up. You can go down. I'm not saying never to go down. You just don't want to be fluctuating. Okay. And you want to know what your price is so that when you do have to go up, you're ready to go up. Okay. Pricing evolves as you grow. The more staff you have, the more complex your pricing gets. The more admin time is needed to deal with those employees. So when you're a solo or a 1 to 2 person, it's not that complex. You start to move into 5 or 6 people. Well, now you need more time doing payroll. Now you need more time doing compliance issues, keeping up with the insurance, so on and so forth. And then your pricing systems have to grow with the business. So, folks, what am I doing here? I'm giving you the basics. I'm giving you the basics, the milk that a parent gives the baby early on, so that you can move to, the Gerber peas and oatmeal as your business grows, and then after that to the steak and mashed potatoes. Okay, you can tell what type of food I like. But this is just the basics. This is an ever evolving process, and the larger you get, the more intricate it becomes. It, but it doesn't have to be complex. Think of it like playing with building blocks. You get your foundation, and then you go up to the next level and you start building, and then to the next level. As you learn things, you will understand them and you will start to ask questions like the email I got today asking me about, production hours and saying, well, I do 7 production hours in an 8 hour day, but I realize I'm not really accounting for that 1 hour where I'm not. And I'm like, good, because that shows me that you're starting to really think about how your business goes. So like when I set up this pricing calculator that a lot of my viewers um, use and have asked me for and that I've given, that was a basic pricing calculator for just out the gate people. It was not something that somebody with 2 or 3 teams is going to be able to use actively. Okay. It was to get the basics to the people that are just starting out that don't understand anything about pricing. And what I do is I find out where people are and meet them there. I don't want to burden them with a whole bunch of stuff that they don't need to worry about right that minute. Okay. So what to do next? This is what I would encourage you to do. I want you to recalculate your hourly rate with the formulas that we were just talking about. You can go back to this video and watch it again. If you're in the group, my free group, the Landscaping Business Growth Hub, I want you to put it in the comment section of this video when I post it. If you're on YouTube after this is posted, I want you to recalculate your hourly rate, and then I want you to use that, review your last 3 jobs and see if you're actually been profitable. So in other words, review the last 3 jobs that you did with the amount of revenue that you took in and all the variable expenses and your overhead and everything, compare it to what it should have been and see whether or not you were actually profitable. And if you are ready to start graduating from milk and on to the peas and eventually the steak, then I encourage you to join the school community that I have. It's the link will be in the video that when this is posted after this. Um, it is $59 a month. There are lessons in there for a wide range of topics from marketing to pricing to understanding basic business principles to hiring team, training team, and every month we're adding stuff. So I encourage you to do that. I do want to see if there are any questions before we finish up. And give me just a second here. No, I don't have any questions right now, so that's good. Thank you, folks. You all have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will see you